wage their battle to destroy the evil forces of the Decepticons, the Transformers. Robots in disguise.
Hello and welcome to another episode of A Sip of Cinema, only on SCTV. Welcome everybody on this Saturday night once again.
Hey everybody.
To my permanent guest, Andrew, that guy. All right, so this week we have Enter the Dragon, our first martial arts movie. Actually, I shouldn't say that, should I? I guess our first non-Van Damme martial arts movie. I guess more traditional martial arts movie. That's sort of the first Hollywood/Chinese
first
martial
Asian
arts movie.
First Asian, is it?
I just mean within the context of Hollywood, like their first foray into Chinese martial arts. But for us, I was trying to think about like where, like in terms of the timeline, where this pops up, because I think we watched. It's possible we watched Jackie Chan before this.
Possibly,
right?
I feel like we might have watched them. Possibly, I feel like our dad would have just hired out like a bunch of Bruce Lee movies and Jackie Chan, and we just watch them all There's a cat tail.
But I always
Uh,
thought Jackie Chan was us and our friends like renting those movies rather than like it wasn't just a family thing for us. I think it was sorry. I think it was like a friends thing to Jackie Chan, but not Bruce Lee, you know. I thought Bruce Lee was like
I guess so.
on a different level. I think I don't know. A different sort of viewing experience. It's hard to explain. Um,
When you put it that way, I feel like we probably watched Bruce Lee before Jackie Chan. Then,
yeah, I still can't figure it out, but it's possible.
mm,
Because we probably,
yeah,
I think it's likely we knew who Bruce Lee was before we knew who Jackie Chan was, just because of the
I think so.
the level of fame. Bruce Lee was way more famous. And Bruce Lee sort of became a mythical character in a way.
Yeah,
Um,
I think he became like legendary, and he had a bunch of exploits, all these unexplainable feats that he could do, like the 1 inch punch and like his unbelievable fast kicks and punches, and his I guess just his physical ability and his
yeah,
fitness level.
yeah. Talk about your experience with the movie growing up. What do you remember?
I remember the legend who is Bruce Lee, and I remember also. I just remember him being bloodied from. I guess it's from the iconic scene in this movie where he's got the scratches all over his body and his face. Yeah, I'd say that, and also like the sound effects and the movie itself. It has a theme song like Enter the
Yeah.
Dragon is this kind of like the 70s kind of I don't know how to explain it, what kind of like tune it has. The
No,
theme song.
no, it has the traditional sort of funk 70s style to it.
Yeah, like a
Like,
funky disco-y kind of
yeah,
with those instruments and sounds.
yeah,
It's kind of James Bondy, but more funky.
yeah, exactly. So this movie is very 70s. Like this is
Yeah.
like quintessential 70s cinema. Like you said, in terms of the music, the presentation, the acting, the dress, you know, how they were dressed, how they sort of spoke to each other and acted. It's very much of its time, which is interesting to watch from the perspective of 2023. But for me as a kid, you know, it sort of had a huge impact for me in terms of seeing nunchucks on the screen and a guy like Bruce Lee, you know, how he's built and how he moves, like the speed and everything. It was sort of a fascinating aspect of cinema that we didn't really see because even if we watched a Van Damme movie, Van Damme's martial arts style was pretty much the opposite, sort of a lot slower, sort of that American style. But then we saw Bruce Lee move, and it's like, well, you know, there's no one faster than this guy. It seems. So it's interesting, and then all the different characters. Yeah, all the characters are really interesting in this movie. There's not many characters, but all of them are pretty memorable and interesting in their own way, as we'll talk about.
Definitely.
Okay, so Enter the Dragon, released in 1973, directed by Robert Klaus, who also directed Game of Death, which was released after the death of Bruce Lee. The film was written by Michael Allen, who also wrote the Flash Gordon film from 1980, and also co-written by Bruce Lee. Stars Bruce Lee, Jim Kelly as Williams, John Saxon as Roper, and we have a young Bola Young, at least a decade or two before Bloodsport. What year is Bloodsport? Is like 88, wasn't it? So this is like 15 years earlier.
I feel like it might have been a bit sooner than 88. Maybe it's 87, 86. It could be 88.
Yeah, 1988, Bloodsport. So 15 years prior to that, so much younger. Bolo Young. Still the same body shape. Maybe just a bit smaller than Bloodsport, but still like the huge pecs, huge lats, huge traps, compared to every other Asian guy. So he sort of stood out like a sore thumb. But we'll talk about Bolo in due time. So the movie starts with the fight.
Hey, do you want to cheers first?
Oh yeah, we forgot about the cheers. Bloody hell. Bloody hell. Wait. We didn't even do the sip because I was distracted by cats. So I'm drinking it on some Buffalo Trace. Good old, reliable, high quality, cheap American bourbon. Kentucky bourbon. What do you got?
I'm drinking a pastry stout. It's
pastry stout.
It's what are they called? Stomping Grounds. It's one of my least favorite brands, but this panettone flavor, it's like Italian. You know the dessert cake,
Yeah.
Italian.
Yeah.
It's got like those candied citrus, dried fruits and stuff in like.
So what's the percentage on that one?
It's have a look. 6.5.
It's nice and strong, isn't it? For a beer. Yeah. It's interesting. Yeah. We'll see how that pours. It should be dark. Like all of these styles of beers is very, very dark. High alcohol percentage. Very foamy head. Is it sweet? Have you had it before?
It is a bit sweet. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's got candied fruit, got dried fruit, chocolate, malt. Yeah, it's quite sweet, but it's got a really nice mouthfeel.
Yeah, but if anyone's like not familiar with this type of beer, it's not sweet in terms of like a White Claw or something. It's like sort of this subtle sweetness you would get in like a more complex alcohol or even coffee or something. It's like you get sweetness, but it's not overwhelmingly sweet. And sort of this nice background sweetness that you get in these types of drinks. So
yeah, it's
same with the whiskey, really. Yeah, same with this bourbon. Like it's sweet, but it's not like a White Claw. But anyway, here's a toast to Enter the Dragon. Introduced us to Bruce Lee, introduced us to nunchucks and fast martial arts, all the cool stuff kids like back in the day. So here's to Enter the Dragon.
Cheers.
Yeah, Buffalo Trace, the type of thing. If you want a nice sipping bourbon, but not too complex, just good, consistent stuff for $50. So let's begin. So it starts with the fight. Let's bring this up first. We're going to start with the picture, like we always do. Do you know who this gentleman is?
I do know who it is. I only recognized him watching it again. I was like, is that Samo?
Yep.
And then I had to double check because they don't really focus on his face or anything.
Yeah, Sammo Hung.
I just, because it was mostly just the way he moved. He did those backflips and he had, he's a little bit budge.
A little bit, yeah. A little pudgy compared to Bruce Lee.
I think it's Samo.
Yeah, so that's Sammo Hung, one of the two main cameos in this film, along with Jackie Chan, which we'll have a look at later. So it's interesting having Sammo and Jackie Chan in a Bruce Lee movie because considering that they had their own sort of career in martial arts films, martial arts slash comedy films, um, in the 70s and 80s and 90s. So, um, interesting bit of trivia for us as well, because we were fans of Sambo and Jackie Chan as much
Yeah,
as Bruce Lee. So,
feel like we watch a lot more of them.
mm,
I guess it's just because they had so many movies, and Bruce Lee, he did die just
mm,
after this movie came
that's
out,
right.
or
Yeah.
just before this movie
Yeah.
came out. So
He died 3 weeks before the movie was released. So they wrapped it up. They wrapped up filming and editing and stuff. But yeah, he died before he could attend the premiere. So it's actually an extremely successful film. So in today's terms, the film would have made $500 million if you sort of extrapolate the amount of money it made in the 70s compared to 2023 money. So extremely successful film. So it starts off with the fight between Lee and Sammo. And it's all these monks hanging around watching. So it's the Shaolin temple where the fight's taking place. First thing I noticed was the gloves and the fighting style. It's very MMA. It's like literally an MMA fight because actually, let's bring up the picture again. So Bruce Lee like wraps him up like a jujitsu move, like literally a jujitsu move. So it's an interesting way to start. Like it wasn't just a karate fight at the beginning; it's like a MMA fight. So that was really cool. And then like Bruce taps him out. Then after the fight, Lee does this like double flip over 4 guys. It's like his trick move at the end. And then Lee sort of has a discussion with his teacher. And his teacher's like, "Oh, you've achieved like the highest level of martial arts. Now it's just like you're at like the spiritual level of martial arts. There's nothing else like you need to learn physically." And then they have this philosophical discussion about it, and Lee's talking about how the opponent no longer exists, and then his teacher's like, the enemy hides behind images that you need to reveal, which is exactly foreshadowing for his fight with Han at the end. So interesting start, very philosophical start at the beginning. And it's a very interesting philosophical start to the film. And then Bruce Lee's student shows up, and then Bruce Lee sort of goes through, some lessons with him as well.
for some reason,
Yeah.
like when I reflect and try to think back of what I remember about this movie as a kid, I don't really remember Bruce Lee being a Shaolin monk in this. Like it explains a lot more now. Like watching it again more recently, just how elite he was in martial arts.
Yeah.
So it explains why he's just really unbeatable in this movie. Like he's just so far beyond everybody that he fights.
Yeah. Exactly. And then his teacher mentions Han, who's the main villain of the film, who has brought shame to Shaolin Temple. And then an intelligence guy shows up, Braithwaite, and he's talking about Han's martial arts tournaments that he holds on his island every few years. And then during this discussion, Lee's young student shows up, and Lee tells his student to kick him. And his first kick is terrible. And then Lee's like, "There's no emotional content." And then he kicks with anger. He says, "No, not anger. emotional content. Um, Basically, he keeps like slapping his student on the head whenever he does something wrong, which is hilarious. Like he's just getting beaten the whole time. But basically, the lesson is for his student to be more perceptive, just to be aware of his emotions, what he's feeling, what his opponent's doing, everything around him, in order to improve his fighting ability. And then after that, we cue to the theme song and the opening credits. And like you said, this very, very 70s opening credits sequence, the music and the credits and everything. And then we see everybody arrive. And when I say everybody, I mean just Williams and Roper. We see Williams and Roper arriving in Hong Kong. But that's one of the things I wanted to mention for this film is the martial arts tournament aspect of the film. And so another martial arts tournament that we've watched in this series is Bloodsport. And one of the biggest differences between this and Bloodsport is the sheer number of characters. So in Bloodsport, we had this huge number of different fighters. It's basically like a fighting game in terms of the different fighting styles. How they look completely different. They talk different. They're from different countries. Whereas in this film, the tournament is mainly focused on 3 guys. Like there's other guys that fight, but the main focus is on 3 guys. So we got Williams, the dude with the afro, and then we got Roper. The only picture I can get is Roper in the rickshaw. It's black and white, but we see Roper in the rickshaw hanging around, running around Hong Kong. So one of the interesting things about Roper and Williams is that they're both actual martial artists. So Roper is a black belt, and Williams is a karate champion as well. So they can actually fight in real life. And they're relatively tall, pretty big guys. Like Roper's pretty big guy. So I thought they were well cast for their roles in this movie. There's sort of a nice contrast to the sort of smaller stature, faster Bruce Lee. And so later that night, Braithwaite and Lee are watching the footage of Han and O'Hara. So O'Hara, another gigantic martial artist, with a huge scar on his face. So that's Han's bodyguard. And then we see clips of O'Hara doing like martial arts tricks with boards, and like boards on fire and boards being held. Like he's not fighting anyone; he's just hitting boards the whole time.
And they're breaking boards on him as well.
Yeah,
like 2x4s and big lengths of wood.
And so but that's not the most interesting thing, because the most interesting thing about Han is coming up, because Braithwaite basically says Han owns this island that's outside the jurisdiction of any country. And based on their intelligence, it seems like women are being trafficked and drugged by Han. And they're being sold to like wealthy clients who come to the island to hang out and like meet the women. And guess who that sounds like? Epstein. Han is the Epstein of Hong Kong, basically. Like I was shocked that Han was like literally Jeffrey Epstein in this movie. So that was interesting, which sort of makes sense. And then to your point about the James Bond connection, Han is very much a Bond villain. In fact, Williams later on says you're like a villain out of a comic book or something. And so I thought Han was one of the strongest aspects of this movie overall, I thought he was a really awesome villain, a great bad guy, because mainly because he can actually fight.
Yeah.
Like he's actually deadly. You know,
And he wasn't as bad as Epstein though. We should make that clear. Like, at least the women were like of age. That's
Yep.
that's the important thing.
Yeah, but we don't know that. I wouldn't
Well,
make
from
that
what
assumption at all.
from what we saw,
You're probably right, but anything goes with this type of thing. You know what I mean? But I thought that was an interesting sort of character profile for Han, having the island, trafficking, drugs, you know, facilitating the elites around the world, most likely. Like, really, really interesting character to start the film with. Also, guns are not allowed on the island, which is an interesting twist. Because the when they made the film, they didn't want guns. Like Bruce Lee wanted a gun, but the filmmaker was like, "No, we don't want guns. We want to make a martial arts film without guns. So there's no guns." And Braithwaite's agency is actually unknown. It's unidentified throughout the film, but we can ascertain that it's similar to something like the CIA or some other deep state intelligence operation. MI6 probably, since he's from England.
Yeah.
And so he tells Lee about a female agent that's on the island that sort of lost contact with, which is also really interesting. Interesting aspect of everything, having one of his sort of operatives already on the island. So it sort of starts off as this spy espionage type of film mixed with martial arts, which sort of adds another dimension to just having a film about guys beating up each other. So and then we get a flashback. Well, not a flashback. We sort of cut to Lee's father talking about Han and Han's men, because Lee's father and his sister has a history with Han's men 3 years ago. And so it's a very tragic story about the death of Lee's sister, actually.
Lady Whirlwind.
Lady Whirlwind. Wait, I'll play this clip and then you explain Lady Whirlwind.
Run! Run! Ow!
Yeah, I couldn't show too much of that, obviously for obvious reasons, but yeah, his sister kicks a lot of ass. Like she beats up heaps of guys. So what's up with Lady Whirlwind?
It's just that she was a known martial artist, female martial artist, in the Asian movies, and she was just known as Lady Whirlwind.
Yeah, so she was a really good fighter.
Yeah, so
she could move
she's
really well.
She headlines her own movies, and she got a part in this Bruce Lee Hollywood film, which is good. So I guess this is similar as Sammo and Jackie Chan getting a taste of Hollywood action.
Yeah, but I really like the women in this movie because, like, especially Han's daughters are like really deadly. They can fight. Like it's so different to the way women are portrayed in movies these days. Like they're just like they're strong in all the wrong ways, but you see a movie like this, like they're super deadly but still very feminine, and so they hide their deadliness, behind just a demure feminine aspect. So interesting contrast in that regard. But So as we saw, Lee's sister, she escapes to an empty warehouse eventually after like running through the streets, beating up guys, like getting like busted up and bruised. Um, she escapes to the warehouse, but there's huge windows and they bust down the windows. And then O'Hara shows up last. Um, and then instead of, you know, facing what was coming to her, because she knew what they were going to do, basically, she takes a piece of glass and ends her own life. What's that? What's the Japanese term for that? Just blanking on it. I can never remember stuff like this during the stream.
Seppuku.
Seppuku, that's right. She commits seppuku instead of experiencing the indignity of what they were going to do. So
Supposed to stick it in your stomach and then like
I thought the
slash
heart,
your gut open.
like you wouldn't put it. Is it gut? You know, like if you're sick in your gut, you're not dying. Like you're gonna die later, but not. You know, that's like the worst.
How do you stick it into your heart, with your rib cage?
You angle it up, like your sternum area, and then just below sternum, liver, you angle up.
I guess that makes more sense.
I think what you're talking about is disembowelment, which isn't a death sentence within at least a few hours.
I'm gonna have to look up seppuku.
I wonder if it will show up in Ghost of Tsushima, but it hasn't so far. But and so we cut to Lee's monologue at his mother's grave, talking about what he has to do now to avenge his sister. He knows that it's likely he's going to have to kill someone.
Yeah,
and
so that's like going against. That's like going against the Shaolin monk teaching as well.
Yeah.
So it would be his mother's. I mean, she doesn't want him to commit that sin of murder.
Yeah,
but he feels like it's pretty much a revenge story.
Yeah,
he's not just tracking down Han. It's personal for him.
Exactly. And so we cut back to the present time, and we focus on Roper. Roper gets his own flashback scene where he's on the golf course. He's betting with this guy. Then he's really bad at golf, apparently, because his ball goes into the trees, and then as he's looking for the ball, these three guys like show up and try to get some money out of him. Roper basically destroys them pretty easily.
Owes him like 175K or something.
Yeah,
that's like a lot of money back then.
Like a ton of money. Yeah, back then. Yeah,
it's still a lot now.
Yeah. Yeah, so Roper kicks their asses, but then and then he comes back to the golf course and it's like, I'm going to book. He asks his assistant to book his flight to the tournament, and then asks her how much money he has left. And she's like $63.
He's like, it's yours.
Yeah, she's you're so generous. Then we see Williams's flashback. And he's walking around a dojo in America. And then he's walking home at night and he gets like harassed by a couple of shady cops. And then he like beats up the cops and steals their cop car.
What's a jig?
A jig.
A jig. They call him jig. What do they say? This jig ain't going anywhere. I guess it's some racist term for, I guess, a black.
That is. Person. It's a derogatory term for a black person. Yeah.
It's not one that I'm very familiar with.
No, neither am I familiar with that either. But they call him a jig. So basically, a couple of racist cops try to shake him down.
It's funny. He jacks their car.
Yeah, he steals their car. Yeah, and then it turns out Williams and Roper actually know each other because they meet on the boat. Because they both served in Vietnam together. And they start talking about the rumors they heard about Han. And they talk about like the different guys on the boat. They point out like the New Zealand guy, and they don't know who Lee is because he's just hanging around on the boat. And then there's a praying mantis fight on board, of course. And then, of course, Roper has to bet on the mantis fight and loses to Lee. Like Lee gives Roper 5-1 odds, which is insane. But then Roper still loses. And then we cut to the New Zealand fighter, like starts harassing one of the guys working on the ship. Like he knocks the basket of oranges out of his hands for no reason.
Yeah, he's just being a dick.
Yeah, real idiot. And then we get this iconic line.
Do I bother you?
Don't waste yourself. My style? You can call it the art of fighting without fighting.
The art of fighting without fighting? Hey, what the hell are you doing? Hey, are you crazy?
The art of fighting without fighting. It's great accents overall in that scene. But he actually, he actually demonstrates the art of fighting without fighting because he beat the New Zealand guy without fighting. So he literally did that.
That would have been funnier if it was an Aussie guy.
Yeah, it should have been an Aussie guy. Yeah, it's sort of random being a New Zealand guy.
Yeah.
Pretty random. But basically, Lee convinces this guy to fight him on a nearby island, and so that's why you see him in the clip on the boat because it's like, I get on the boat, we'll go to the island and fight, and the New Zealand guy gets on the boat, but then Lee just like lets go of the rope, unties the rope. So, and then eventually they arrive at Han's Island, and there's a young Bolo Yeung greeting them as they dock. And then the camera sort of pans over the island, and there's like about over 100 guys like learning martial arts in rows in different areas of the compound. I've got a picture of the party because Han is extremely hospitable. So he might be a murderous villain, but he's very, very hospitable.
You can throw a party.
You can throw a party.
And he can accommodate his guests.
Yeah, that's one way to put it. So I really like this scene. There's so much like going on in the scene. You can sort of pause it every now and then to look in the background to see what people are doing. And there's like all these like cages, golden cages with birds in them. And like people are like walking around with carts of like live seafood. That's pretty wild. But Lee's just like sitting on the tape, sitting somewhere like eating grapes. And Roper's like chatting up a couple of girls, of course. And so Roper, like, he gets up and comes up to Lee and it's like, "Hey, I'm going to win my money back." And Lee's like, "How?" It's like, "You'll find out." And then he talks to Williams, and Williams is like, "Yeah, I can't find anything I can actually eat." He's like lifting up the lid. It's like, "Oh, there's nothing he can."
Hey,
eat.
you see what's in front of him. That he's like,
Yeah.
no, I think I'll pass. That's like it's like a platter of chicken feet. I feel like
probably
I
was
feel like
just
I'd have the same problem trying to find
yeah.
food.
Yeah, it reminds me of Bloodsport as well. Like when Forrest Whitaker's like at the restaurant, it's like picking at his food. It's like, oh, I'm gonna find out if it's dead yet or something. So um and so we hear a gong and then Han shows up with a bunch of girls. So at this stage we don't know those girls are actually his daughters, but and that they're deadly, um but Roper like eyes Han suspiciously, as does Williams. Like they know that there's something up with this guy. Um and then Han has to demonstrate how deadly his daughters are, which is really cool. This is one of the cool parts of the film.
Gentlemen, you have our gratitude.
Yeah, I like that scene a lot. Because like she blows like that's the spy, but we
Yeah.
don't know the spy at that point. But that's the spy, and she like blows the the dart, which seems physically impossible. But that was really cool. And then like Bruce Lee like catches it, like pulls it out really violently. That was really cool.
Very seriously.
Yeah. And so Han just like turns around and leaves, and then the celebration continues because everybody like pauses. Like the sumo wrestlers literally pause, and then as soon as he leaves, like music comes back and
Everyone
starts
just
music again.
stands still. That was cool.
Yeah, that was really cool. And so Williams is just like laying in his room listening to music on his headphones, and then the hostess comes in, and brings like about 10 women for him to choose from. And I think he
Buffet
chooses-
line.
yeah, and he chooses like 4 because he's really tired, so he can only choose 4. And then she goes to Lee's room next, and then Lee's like, "Oh, I want that girl, the owner of the dart." And the hostess is like, "Yeah, I can get her for you. Just wait." And then next it's Roper's turn to choose, and the Roper's like, "Yeah, I already chose," and he likes the hostess because when they arrived at the island, he tells Williams, "Oh, a man can learn a lot about himself from a woman like that, or something."
Yeah,
He
a
has
woman like that
a
can
line.
teach you a lot about yourself.
Teach a lot about yeah, that's right. He has that line. So he
I
had,
liked, I liked Roper. He's a really funny character. He could have his own spin-off, I reckon, like his own movie or his own series or something, and it'll be hilarious.
like he was
Action-packed.
tall and like extremely handsome.
Yeah, it's
Like
like
you
a
think he
real
would be a
ladies'
big
man.
star or something. Yeah. But yeah, it was good. um, and what do I have to? Jeez. Oh yeah. And so the dart girl, she shows up to Lee's room, and we find out it's a secret agent mailing. Um, and she's talking about how the girls that come to the island, they disappear eventually. And we get the impression that she will disappear eventually too, if she hangs around long enough. Which is consistent with trafficking, with human trafficking. They're supposed to disappear at some point. And then we cut to Lee in the training area. Like he's doing some sparring by himself, and then O'Hara shows up, tells him to attend the morning ritual in uniform. But Lee's like, he shows up without his uniform. He just like shows up. Well, he doesn't care. And then we see, like, again, we sort of get this montage of all the different martial artists training on Lee's compound, and they're doing like the heat thing where you have like the hot rocks and they're putting their hand in it.
Yeah,
Like
big,
that was really
massive bowls of hot rocks.
yeah, that was fascinating as a kid. Like what, like you're gonna like improve the sturdiness of your hand by doing that. So
Yeah.
um but that was a consistent thing that we learned as kids, right? Like doing something over and over again to
I feel
improve.
like that's something that they do, like in the Shaolin Temple. And Mr. Han is trying to create his own kind of temple
Yeah.
because he's from
Oh.
like the Shaolin Temple himself.
Hmm.
So he's just making how would you say it? A less righteous
Less noble.
or less noble.
But like you could also say it's like he's trying to start his own cult in a way,
Yeah.
like his own movement, where if he's like the supreme leader. But like I was thinking of stuff like in Kickbox that Van Damme like kicks the tree to improve the strength of his shin. Like it's a similar principle, right? But anyway, bloody hell. Stepping on my keyboard. Anyway, Han shows up, and it's the beginning of the tournament finally. And so Williams is fighting the New Zealand guy, first battle, and Roper's on the sideline placing bets. This is why Roper's like a great guy. Where's this picture? So Roper's betting with the guy with the Hitler mustache.
Got his side hustle going.
Literally as a Hitler mustache. Like like World War II never happened. Which is pretty interesting. But yeah, Roper's here. He's placing bets on Williams. Because Williams is actually, kicking the New Zealand guy's ass pretty badly. Like it wasn't really a competition. And so next Roper has to fight. And so Roper tells Williams, yeah, keep this guy on the hook. Bet, keep placing bets. Most likely to place bets on Roper during the fight, because at the start of the fight, like Roper goes down a few times. Until like he gets odds of 8-3. Like he tells Williams, wait until this guy gives you 8-3. And so like they keep looking at each other on the sidelines, like nodding or shaking their head, which is really cool. And then eventually Williams like nods his head, and then Roper comes in and just destroys this guy. Like he just beats him really, really badly that he literally can't get up again. Yeah,
I like that aspect of it. It brings in that element of comedy.
Yeah,
how Roper and Williams have like this little side hustle thing going on as well. It gives a different kind of perspective on how they're handling the tournament. Like they're not taking it too seriously. They can do their thing on the side.
Yeah. And so after the fight, Roper and Williams are sort of relaxing with Han's guests, shall we say, or Han's gifts. So Roper's with the hostess, and then like Williams is with like about 40 girls in his room. But then Williams is like, yeah, I got to go outside. And then one of the girls is like, no, you can't go. You can't go out. It's not allowed. And then Williams is like, what, are you going to stop me? Like, I'm going outside. What do you reckon? But then also, but he's not the only one, because Lee he wants to go outside and do some investigating of his own. And so he's skulking around, doing the stealth moves outside in his like black outfit. Like he almost gets eaten by a guard dog. But he also discovers the secret passage in the garden. And so he drops a rope into it, has a look around, but then leaves. But then one of the guards sees the rope, and so they like try to cut it. But then we cut to Williams. Like Williams is like outside meditating, like shadow boxing. And he sees Lee climbing up the small wall. I should say that when the guards discover the rope, Lee comes out and like fights the guards. Like he fights off a few guards, like 3 or 4 guards, and then escapes. And then Williams sees him like scaling the wall. But Williams isn't a snitch, as we'll see later. The next day, Han is not happy. He's complaining about how someone doesn't appreciate, the benefits of staying on Han Island, and that someone decided to go outside the bounds of their room and to walk around the grounds. And so he's sort of on the warpath trying to see, trying to find out what was going on. But he's also mad at his guards. And that's something I noticed as well. Like his guards are really pathetic. Like they're just wandering around smoking. Like they're fat and like probably can't fight. Like it's just the worst guards you could imagine. And so
that's why they're not his personal guard, I guess.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
I feel like they're just kind of lazy because they don't have anything to really protect. No one's going to be snooping. It's like another night. So
Yeah.
they've probably been doing it for years and they just got bad habits. And this was the night where they had to be alert.
Yeah, I was thinking exactly the same thing when I was watching. Is that what would they have to worry about? Like, what are they actually guarding? Like, why would anyone go after like Han? But I guess in this case, Lee, they didn't expect someone like Lee to show up. But the guards have to be punished, and we need Bolo to punish the guards. Yeah, I'll put that last shot in. I like that shot where they're standing next to each other.
Man, Bolo looks so young. If he told me he's like 17, 18, I'd be like, yeah, he could be that young for sure.
Yeah,
I don't know what his real age was at the time of this shooting. But he looks so young, yeah.
Yeah, super young. But it's like those guards, they die like in like really weird ways. Like the last guy, he like gets like he's like I don't know how he gets crushed
He
somehow.
gets like held like a baby and crushed.
He gets held like a baby and then crushed
like a compactor.
Yeah, I don't know. This is super weird. But I'm just looking up Bolo's age. He was 27 during Enter the Dragon. But he looks 17. I agree. But yeah, it's just like the other guy where he pulls his hair and then breaks his neck while pulling his hair. But that's the other thing about this movie in terms of this movie, like the sound effects and stuff. Like the sound effects, like the entire movie, the sound was put in post production. Like all the sound was put in during editing, like every single sound in the movie. That's why it looks dubbed in some areas. Because Han couldn't speak English, for example.
Yeah.
And so he had to like mouth the English words the best he could. But yeah, that's the way they did it. Like they just recorded all the sounds separately and put it over the top of the film. And so we're up to Lee's first fight. And so he has to fight O'Hara, which is a great first fight because, of course, he has to avenge his sister. And so it's the perfect battle for Lee. And so before the fight starts, O'Hara has a board and he punches the board. And then Lee says, "Board, don't hit back." And then Lee like has a short flashback to his sister. So this fight was really cool. So this is one of the standout fights for me in the film. So Lee's extremely fast and sort of beating up really like O'Hara literally can't get a hit in. Like as if this is Street Fighter, it would be a perfect victory, basically. Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
You lose.
Yeah, O'Hara's like getting pissed off. He's like losing his cool because he's just getting destroyed. We can talk about it. We can actually see what happened.
O'Hara!
Yeah, some really, really cool fighting choreography in that fight.
I feel like a lot of those like hits connected.
Yeah,
Like
especially
some
that
of those
first one.
kicks and yeah, that's pretty. But I feel like that last kick as well. You must have been wearing some kind of padding.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I remember hearing about some mythology surrounding that kick as well. Like one of the guys at the back like broke his arm or something because the kick was so because like 5 or 6 guys get taken out from that kick. Like it
And
wasn't just
chairs and-
O'Hara. But then after that, like O'Hara gets up with a broken bottle. And Han's like
where
really
those
pissed off.
bottles came from.
No, it's probably the other guys like drinking the night before or whatever. But and so O'Hara like breaks the bottle, which pisses off Han. Like Han's like, "What are you doing? You're, like disgracing, like you're disgracing the tournament."
Yeah, I feel like just the way that O'Hara behaved, like originally they go to the main island or something before and they wreak havoc when they try to attack Lee's sister and like even now in front of Han he disobeys him and just does whatever. So he kind of deserved what he got.
So, as a result, Lee has no choice but to take out O'Hara for good. And so he kicks the bottle out of his hand and then knocks him down and then basically stomps on his chest until he's dead. With
like,
one kick, I should say. He doesn't keep stomping him. He stomps on him and then...
It's like both feet, yeah?
Yeah.
It's like Bruce Lee's special attack.
Yeah. But then...
in a few movies.
But it's like... But then it's like... But then it's like... we see it sort of closes up on Lee's face and you see the pain and anguish on his face as he delivers a killing blow. So there's a nice bit of characterization as well. And so Han is so pissed off he ends the tournament for the day. And then the hostess tells Williams to go up to Han's study as soon as possible. And then Williams like, yeah, whatever, we'll go, whatever. But then, like, we don't really think nothing of it, at this point of the film. And then during the meeting, Han tells Williams to prepare for defeat. Williams like, no, I'll be too busy looking good. Because they're talking about, and they start talking about what was going on last night. And Williams is like, no, I wasn't the only one that was outside at night. And then Han is like, who was it? But the Williams is not a snitch. He saw Lee, but he's not going to snitch on Lee. He's like, bullshit, Mr. Handman. And then Williams calls him a comic book villain. And then Han's guys show up to beat up Lee. And then Lee, to beat up Williams, I should say. And then Williams, beats them up because they're crap. And then Han's like, okay, I got to take out this guy. And so during the fight, we find out that Han has a fake hand. In this case, it was his metal hand, which is basically like a deadly weapon at that point. It's like he was just beating on Williams repeatedly with his metal hand, eventually killing him. But first, the fight spills into the opium room. I'm calling the opium room because there's a bunch of girls in there high as hell, and they're just giggling.
It could also be
time.
known as a drug den.
Yeah,
or the
they're high on something.
Lounge.
They're
just
super
laughing.
high on something. And they can't stop laughing. They're not reacting properly to what was going on. Williams lands on a girl, breaks her glasses, and then she's still laughing. And so, like I said, Han ends up killing Williams with a metal hand. We cut to Han's meeting with Roper. So Roper gets a tour of Han's museum. And we see all these hands.
Yeah, the different prosthetic hands, weird. There's a claw or an alien hand or some weird stuff. And I remember as a kid that kind of freaked me out a bit.
Yeah,
I remember feeling a bit uneasy. It scared me a bit. I remember.
Yeah, this is a fascinating scene for me as well as a kid. Yeah, this mystery of horrors, museum of horrors, I should say, a museum of mystery and horrors. But then the last one they look at is the skeleton of Han's missing hand, which he doesn't say it's my missing hand. Roper asks about it, and Han is like, whatever, don't worry about it. But we can gather that it's probably his hand. But at the start of the movie, I didn't mention, Braithwaite implies that he doesn't like guns because there was some sort of accident in the past or some sort of traumatic event with guns. And we can surmise that may have had something to do with how he lost his hand. And so the last stop on the tour is the guillotine. And so this is like a test for Roper. Han wants to see what Roper would do for the guillotine. So Roper's like, no, I'm going to put my hand in there or my head in there. But then Han puts the cat on the guillotine to see what Roper would do.
If you please, Mr. Roper. You mean you want me to put my head on that thing? Now you've got 8 more. Faked out again.
Yeah, another subtle comedic bit with Roper. That was a fun scene. Pretty tense. Like from an audience perspective, like there's no way to tell that there was anything else other than like a real guillotine. So,
Yeah.
like I remember like sort of being stressed out that the cat was like gonna get chopped up. But it was all a test. Everything's a test with Han during this scene with Roper. And so they go down to the secret area, and it's a power plant, as well as, and they sort of go from the power plant to another room, and all his daughters are there.
Tattoo parlor.
Tattoo parlor. And Roper's like, oh, a man can be judged by his appetites, because he doesn't know that it's his daughters, but Han is like, no, they are my daughters.
And he's like, a man's strength is measured by his appetite.
Oh, yeah,
Something
yeah.
like that.
Yep. And so Roper's
And
like
it's his
impressed,
daughter.
but it's just his daughters. Yeah. And then he's my personal god, because he can actually trust his daughters. Like he can't trust gods that he just pays, because they
I wonder
actually like
who the mothers are.
the
Or
month.
if it's the same mother. Mother or mothers.
Most likely
Mm.
mothers. But they actually like fight Roper briefly. The one girl like flips him over. But then he like lands in front of another girl who starts like rubbing his hair. Starts looking very comfortable. And so he gets a personal tour of Han's opium factory. But there's also like an area where they're forcibly injecting women to get them hooked on drugs. And so some of them are like going crazy, which is pretty freaky. But then Han like makes an offer to Roper. It's like, listen, work with me and you can expand the operation to the United States. But Roper's like walking around like, what the hell's going on? And he also shows Roper the refugees that were captured. Like there's heaps of them, as we'll see later on. But and now the final test for Roper is showing Roper Williams's body. Because at this point we figured that Williams might be dead, but we had no idea that it'll be this bad. But basically, we see Williams sort of strung up above this pool, like beaten up and dead. And
It's like a spike pool. It's like all these
like a spike pool.
spikes around the edging, and so you just assume like there's spikes at the bottom of the pool too, or something.
Exactly. Yeah, it's pretty crazy that that Williams died in that way, because you wouldn't expect a main character like that to die in such a way.
Yeah, it was a real unexpected way for Williams to go out.
Because he only had one fight as well. But I actually have a picture of his death scene. So this is the spike pool you were mentioning. And all the different guys and the refugees. We see a couple of refugees in their prisons. Han and Roper. And so Roper's like, no, I don't want any of this. What are you talking about? Like this is ridiculous. And so we cut to Lee. He's sneaking around again in the compound. And he goes back to the secret entrance to that in the garden, and there's a snake, like a venomous snake. Yeah, but then Lee like grabs the snake and stuffs it in a bag. And he's walking around the area that Roper just saw, and he sees a woman like trapped and drugged, and one of the women's like, "Save me, help me." Then he goes to this other room with some guys with like the radio, the communications area, because Braithwaite said to find the communications area, like, call me when you get there. And so he uses the snake to scare the communications guys, like the guys in the comm room. And so the guys in the comm room see the snake and they run.
Let's chuck a chair through the window and jump out the window.
Yeah. Yeah. Because there's no other entrance other than where the snake is. And so Lee, he radios Braithwaite, but then the alarm goes off. And so Lee basically has to fight his way out, which is really awesome because we get to see Bruce Lee fighting a bunch of guys, including a guy named Jackie Chan. Not the best picture. That's probably a better. Yeah, but that's like he was in it for like literally a couple of seconds because he gets beaten up pretty badly. But apparently Bruce Lee like actually hit him with a stick accidentally. But yeah, that's Jackie Chan. Yeah, very young Jackie Chan in the Bruce Lee movie. And so he sort of fights with like Bruce Lee gets like a big stick, and then he like picks up he gets 2 shorter sticks, and then eventually he picks up the nunchucks. So nunchucks was a very important aspect of life growing up for us. Which is kind of weird to say. Like, why would a martial arts weapon be important for kids growing up? I don't know. It was just part of that martial arts culture, part of the martial arts scene. Like Bruce Lee had nunchucks. Michelangelo from the Ninja Turtles had nunchucks. It was just a really cool weapon, like the 2 sticks joined by a chain, and then how people like use it seem really cool, as we'll see now. Like that's iconic. Like when he holds up the nunchucks like this, and when he stops like this, like that's iconic. Like that's iconic Bruce Lee imagery right there. But I also remember thinking like getting hit in the head with a nunchuck must hurt a lot.
I remember when we were kids, we tried to make our own nunchucks and trying to like do it real fast, and it was just impossible.
Yeah.
Like if anything, you're just hurting yourself
It's just
more than
hurting
anything.
yourself. You're literally hitting yourself. Yeah. But it was fascinating to watch stuff like that as a kid, like nunchucks and stuff. Like it sort of goes with all the other martial arts weapons, like katana blades and stuff, shurikens. No, that was all fascinating stuff back then. So
Bow stuff, spears.
bow stuff, scythes.
Yeah. But for some reason, nunchucks just stuck out for us. And maybe it's the name, nunchucks. It just sounds cool.
I think what we just saw, like just seeing Bruce Lee do that, like you can't do that with anything else, you know. And so after like Lee beats up the guys, like he eventually gets trapped in this room, and then Han shows up. But then we cut to Braithwaite. So Braithwaite sleeping, but then he finally gets Lee's message he like freaks out. Calling this other guy to wake up. Like they got to get to the island as soon as possible. And so the next day, Han has another presentation. Everybody's there. He's saying today there has to be an edification. And so everybody's like, what the hell is an edification? And so Lee, he's there, and Bolo's there as well. And then Han is like, Roper has to fight Lee. But Roper's like, he's not going to fight Lee. And so Han tells Bolo to fight Roper. And so it doesn't start off well for Roper. Like, Roper gets beaten up. He sort of almost gets pinned by Bolo, but Roper like bites his leg, which I guess is legal on Han Island. And then in the meantime, Mei Lin, she's down in the basement. She's freeing all the refugee prisoners, which we'll see in a minute. Which the audience will see in a minute. And then Roper starts kicking Bolo's ass like really badly. But then, like, as soon as Bolo gets beaten, like, everyone, like, Han tells like different guys hanging around to attack Lee and Roper. So it's basically everyone against Lee and Roper. But at the same time, the refugees, they run out onto the field and start fighting as well. So we've got this gigantic brawl, like over 100 guys just fighting.
That was a cool scene before the refugees come out, where it's just like Lee and Roper are just fighting side by side, and all these guys coming out, and Bruce, like Lee's are taking them down in single kicks, and there's just like a flurry of kicks, and Roper's doing his thing, and I thought that was sick. Like Han's like calling out all these other fighters to come out and face them, and they're just like knocking them down one by one.
Yeah, it's
It
pretty.
was a cool scene. It was a nicely shot scene.
Yeah, it was pretty sick scene. Because you get to see again Bruce Lee's sort of talent. And, why watching him on screen is such a exciting piece of cinema history, really. But of course, Han, he can fight, so he wants to get in there. He wants to have a go at Lee. But he has to change into his, what I'm calling the bear claw hand.
Not bad.
It looks kind of weird in this picture, but that's pretty deadly. Like it has to be a bear claw, like it's furry. It's got 3 claws. But yeah, that's really cool. Having a bear claw hand.
Keeps it in that little case next to him.
Yeah.
Not a gun or anything. The bear claw.
But about a bear claw hand is that the claws can get stuck in wood if you're not careful, which is exactly what happens to Lee. His hand gets stuck and then pops off. And so Lee beats him up again, but then Han gets away and gets a much bigger claw hand. In their fight leading up to the mirror battle,
Gets the Wolverine claws.
The big Wolverine claw, that's right.
But it has the extra claw on it to make 4 fingers.
Yeah. It's really, really long. It's a huge claw.
Man,
Yeah,
that
well,
last
very-
kick, that was such
Yeah.
a vicious kick. He
Yeah.
just cleaned him up. I don't know how he got up after that.
They should have broken his neck for sure. That's a crazy kick.
Kicked him in half.
But a lot of like animalistic sounds from Bruce Lee during the final battle. And
Yeah, so iconic. Like no one else
Yeah.
did those sounds. It's like 100% Bruce Lee only.
yeah, and also the slashes on the stomach was very iconic imagery from Bruce Lee as well. But you can see that the cuts didn't really bother him at all. Like he just sort of shrugs it off and starts beating on Han even more. I noticed also in because I watched the final fight scene a couple of times, but he does like a double sweep kick. Like he sweep kicks one leg and then sweep kicks the next leg,
Yeah.
like within a split second. That was really cool. Like he does really cool sweep kicks actually throughout the fight. Like really, really fast sweep kicks. And then so Han's getting beaten up. Like we saw that last kick, but then Han like grabs this spear. But then the spear gets stuck in the wall, which is ominous for Han later on in the fight. But then Han escapes into the mirror room, and so this is the famous mirror scene where we're not sure who's real. Is it a reflection? Is it really Han? Is it really Lee? And so we're reminded of the conversation between Lee and his teacher in terms of uncovering the deception behind what the enemy is presenting. And so the deception is through the spirit, like, see through the deceptive images to find your enemy, basically. And so that's what Lee has to do. And so Lee, he gets slashed on his back. And then he hears his teacher's words in his head about destroying the deception. And so he decides to break all the mirrors. So he breaks all the mirrors and is sort of stalking around. And then eventually we see him kick Han onto the spear that was stuck through the wall. And then Lee leaves and then spins the door. Spins the spear with Han on it, and you see Han just spinning and spinning and spinning with the mirror. So a really pretty cool imagery to end the film.
It's almost like a magical, mystical room. It just gave it this kind of fantasy kind of aspect to it, or fantasy feeling.
Yeah, because of the music as well. Because the music starts getting all, weird and
Willy Wonkery.
yeah, Willy Wonkery music. Yeah. And so outside, Roper, the fight's basically over. Outside, Roper's like sitting on the seat. He's tired. He's tired and bloody and bruised. And the Roper looks over and see his hostess girlfriend is dead. But then the agency helicopters arrive, and then we see the end appearing as the camera zooms in on the bear claw hand, and then the film ends. And so the film ends sort of very abruptly. We don't get like a final scene with Braithwaite and Lee, or a final scene with Braithwaite or with Lee and Roper, for example, or with Lee and Mei Ling. So we don't get any sort of final conversations, or
you get the I think it's just Lee and Roper. They acknowledge each other, do the thumbs up, and then roll the credits.
Roll credits. Yeah, it sort of reminds me of Kickboxer as well. Like they beat Tong Po and then credits roll basically like right away. So that's how movies were back then. You would have the story would end and then the credits would roll. There's no after credits scene You know, after 2 hours and 45 minutes, another scene after the credits. Like, you know, movies are 90
Yeah,
minutes. You get the
not
job done.
a Marvel movie.
Yeah, that's Enter the Dragon. A very entertaining, fast-paced film. Um, interesting characters all around. Very much of its time. Very much a 70s film in every respect, in terms of the style of the music style of the way the characters look and act and the way they talk. Just the presentation of everything. And watching it as an adult, there's a lot of interesting aspects, especially in terms of Han as a villain, who he is, in terms of the fact that he owns an island and traffics women for global elites. And very familiar to what's going on, what has been going on in the world. So I thought that was interesting. What's some of your final impressions of Enter the Dragon?
I really enjoyed it thoroughly, watching it again. Not knowing that it was Samo makes me like in that first fight scene makes me think I must have been like single digits when I last saw this movie. Like I must have been
Yeah,
really young. So no, I really enjoyed it. I feel like it really portrays Bruce Lee like we remember him, like as the legend that he is, and
yeah,
it's one of those movies where you could probably remake it, and it won't be the same. Like,
Mm.
but I do feel like this story is something that could be remade. It's pretty interesting if you get someone like a intelligent director or something.
Because it
I think it'll
combines,
be
it combines like spy stuff, espionage with a martial arts tournament. You know, it's
yeah, it
like
could
you've
be
got,
like it did reference James Bond. Like
Mm.
it very much is similar to a James Bond kind of movie.
Yeah, which is pretty ambitious. You know, if you're a Bruce Lee type, you know, you want to make a martial arts movie, but then let's add this, you know, spy element to it as well. It's really, really interesting. Before we wrap, I wanted to show this. See, you didn't even know I'm going to show this. Like, this will be a surprise for you and the audience. Watch this. Watch this.
Or is it? Dragon.
You remember playing this game?
Yeah, Dragon. This is awesome. This game.
Yeah. So this is like the Han fight. There you can like during this game you can fight Williams as well. Like you can't fight Roper, you can fight Williams. I thought I'd play the Han fight. It's interesting.
I don't remember fighting. I don't remember this fight. I remember when you're fighting those armored soldiers. I remember them.
Yeah.
And I remember fighting those Navy officer.
Yeah, the Navy guys. Yeah, I remember the Navy guys. Yeah. But when I was watching Enter the Dragon, I just kept thinking about this. Yeah, there was this game. I remember a game where we controlled Bruce Lee, and then we fought Han. Like, yeah, I don't specifically remember fighting Han, but then something in the back of my memory remembers fighting someone like Han. So I don't know. I don't know if we actually finished that game, but I definitely remember like some of the other fights. Yeah. Yeah, it wasn't just a side-scrolling game. It was like a one-on-one fighting game, but you pass through. Like each fight is like a different level that you have to pass during the story mode. So Anyway, that was Enter the Dragon. And join us next time for Under Siege, starring Steven Seagal. So another martial arts guy. This is more of an action film with some martial arts thrown in. so that'll definitely be a fun one. So tune in then. Here's a final toast to Enter the Dragon. Cheers to Enter the Dragon.
Cheers.
Cheers to everyone for watching. We'll see everyone next time. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Bye.
Latest.